Welcome to another broadcast of Philosophic Perspectives on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. And now out to your host, it's Mr. Arthur D. Schwartz.
Why, hello once again. I'm happy that you're with me here, along with Scott. And so tonight's show is called, it's two intersecting topics. And the two intersecting topics concern freedom, or the question, is freedom all that it's cracked up to be? And the other one would be ego and truth, the elusive divide. Now, my reason a couple of reasons brought this to my attention. I mean, actually, I saw just a few days ago, the movie The Arrival, which I'm sure many of you have seen. And wow, what a really great film, I think. Highly recommended. But the thing that ties into tonight's broadcast is that it does have to do with language in an interesting way. I mean, this is science fiction and the whole thing, and but the idea of the language was that it's a language that, if my way of expressing it or understanding it, is it grasps the whole, not the part, and it has no sense of time. It's forward and backward, and that might sound like a lot of mumbo jumbo, but honestly, I think it's incumbent upon all of us who like to think about what's important and how the world works is to actually get to that point in some way, holistically, in other words. The whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And our language sometimes does a good job in distorting that. Our language, and in our language, as many languages, it's Chomsky said it, there's an underlying deep syntax, but there's still many languages, and many languages are different. And that's part of the problem. But even within the context of one particular language, it does a pretty good job sometimes of obscuring meaning so that everyone is totally confused. And, that goes into a discussion of what is philosophy. Because philosophy, in the view of some, and mine included, I mean, there's many versions of it, many ways of saying this, but it really is about clarifying meaning, the meaning of meaning, understanding what we mean when we try to say something, and to untangle confusions. I mean, there's a lot more than just that, but certainly there's an awful lot of confusions done with language. And so sometimes it seems like we're taking one step forward and two steps backward. So I'm going to read this little introduction I wrote for tonight's show to get the ball rolling along this line of conversation. Tonight's show is a discussion on two or three intersecting topics. One is freedom, all that is cracked up to be, and two, ego and truth, the elusive divide. Freedom is great. Well, sure it is. But what if freedom results in political tyranny or personal freedom results in addiction and self-destruction? Is freedom in these cases not all that is cracked up to be? Absolute adherence to a concept rarely or never works. The same applies to truth and especially the relationship to the ego. How many assertions of what is true have more to do with protecting a fragile ego than in dedication to truth-seeking? Oftentimes, not being proved wrong trumps truth. Little pun there. The divide between ego and truth is elusive. So we're talking about these three huge concepts. Freedom. There's no bigger concept than freedom in all of philosophy, except for maybe truth. And ego. I mean, all these things, basically, it's like a triangle, and you probably, on a very broad conceptual terms, have the whole nature of the human existence when you have ego, truth, and freedom. And so the value of philosophy really is to kind of cut to the quick, so to speak. So we'll get to the crux of the matter. Now, on March 2nd last year, I did have a show called Forms of Freedom. So I might refer to that show that does discuss freedom. But what I want to do tonight is, I think I want to keep it kind of contemporary, or by contemporary I mean current. Trump is going to be inaugurated in just a couple of days. And so with him, the candidate that he was and the leader he says he will be or whatever, does raise a lot of questions. And so let's talk about freedom. Is it all that it's cracked up to be? And, clearly, freedom is just the word. Or what did Janis Joplin say? Freedom is just another word for nothing else to lose, nothing more to lose. It really is kind of, sometimes actually the way it's used is the opposite of the way I think it actually, in a philosophical sense, is meant to mean. Because the idea of freedom says, basically, you can do anything you want, right? And so anytime you take that effort away, you decrease freedom. You can do this, you can do that. Well, so if you're free to rob a bank, you're free to OD on heroin. Does that make any sense? Well, in a certain sense, sure. In the sense of it just being a word, it makes perfect sense. You can just say, yeah, anyone can do whatever you want to do. You want to drive your car off the bridge, you can do that. You're free to do that. So, in terms of the semantics, sure, that makes sense. But in terms of the meaning that we hold near and dear to our heart, it means exactly the opposite. Freedom is not that freedom is guided, but guided by two things. Guided certainly by intelligence. So now, when I'm not talking about metaphysically or in the most abstract sense, or in what neuroscientists are talking about. I mean, I do believe there is something called free will that's actually real. It's a certain component. But on a very practical level, this is what I think freedom means. Freedom is your ability to do what you believe you should do. So freedom is about your behavior on a personal level of acting in the way that you believe you should act. And to the extent that you can't do that, then you're not free. Now, how does that make sense? Well, let's say you're a cigarette smoker and you want to quit cigarettes, and you say, darn it, I'm done with cigarettes, and then 5 minutes later you smoke a cigarette. Why? If someone coerces you, there's no debate. You're not free. If you're coerced to do something, you're not free. But however, what if you do something based upon some kind of an emotional reason or habitual reason or obsessive reason, something like that? You're not free either. Why? Why? Here's the reason. Because you're not controlled by your reasoning. Freedom is when we do what we believe we should do for ourselves, for our loved ones, for our country, blah, 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 blah. And you do that, and you're free because you're following. In other words, you are being led by your reason. That's, on a very practical level, what freedom means. But in everyday life, the way the word is used gets really, really, really crazy. And so, in the midst of the political campaign, the notion of freedom. Now, I was talking about personal freedom. Now you graduate, let's say, to the political sphere. We have freedoms in society, freedoms, constitutional freedoms, and so forth and so on. And here's what it really comes down to. and it comes down to both, and this question, and when it comes down to what the ego is and the elusive and truth, it comes down to the fundamental concept of rationality. Rationality encompasses, doing what makes sense, doing what you believe to be correct, being what you believe to be right, and not doing what you believe to be wrong. It's trying to live the good life, the ethical life, to do what you feel is the right thing. And so when you say, obviously one of the major issues here is the abortion issue, right? So if you're pro-abortion, you're supposedly pro-life. If you're opposed to abortion, you're pro-choice. Well, pro-choice, that entails freedom, right? Because freedom is, like I was just describing, is a choice. Pro-life, however, would say, life trumps. Here we go with Trump. Life trumps choice. Well, there's certain merit to that. The thing is this. Freedom is one of the most important things we can imagine, and life is one of the most important things we can imagine. All right, and so in New Hampshire, on their license plates, they say "Live free or die." Well, that's kind of a Yahoo thing to say, But in principle, live free or die. Well, that's an interesting question, because as we just talked about, is freedom all that it is cracked up to be? It depends what you mean by freedom, doesn't it? So let's take the license plate from the New Hampshire. I just saw this while I'm talking here. This is just, I'm just talking. The live free or die. Whether that license plate is really cogent, in my view, has to do with what they mean by freedom. Now, does it live free or die mean that there's no government whatsoever, so that you should not be impeded? No government whatsoever, so pure libertarian or pure anarchist? So is that what would be free? Or a lawless society, no laws impeding you, would that be free? Very, 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 very few people would say that. So you see, when you see the argument between, let's say, socialism and libertarianism, you see how freedom begins to become restricted in the discussion. You begin to narrow it down, because sure, you don't want big brother looking over your shoulders. You don't want all these laws. You don't want to pay all these taxes. You don't want this. You don't want that. So that's freedom. But okay, do you mean every law? Shall I say killing is okay? That's legal. Robbing the bank? Okay, come and get it. No law. Come on, that's ridiculous, right? So that would be totally irrational to say there should be no laws. Well, if you have a law, guess what, folks? You pass one single law, you've impeded, quote unquote, your freedom. However, not if you look at freedom as basically the sister of rationality. This is a deep philosophical point. Even though I totally disagree with Kant's categorical imperative, and there's no point getting into that right now, but what I do believe in is your freedom is dependent upon your ability to follow your wisdom. That's the thing. We need to follow our wisdom and not be so darn afraid of saying, someone calling you, oh, you're against freedom, or, you're doing this, you're doing that, because they're just words. They're just words, and they, at the end of the day, don't matter. Words are important, They're steps on the ladder. I mean, we could not, as human beings, talk about anything without language, without words. However, at the end of the day, what matters is the meaning that the words produce. So when you say that freedom is freedom all that's cracked up to be, I would answer yes, if freedom means there's a good faith effort to understand that what you're doing is what you truly want to do. I mean, I've written a book called Ethical Empowerment: Virtue Beyond the Paradigms. It's all about my justification for what sort of dialogue or what sort of deliberation you take to make ethical decisions. So, I do believe there's a way to come to these opinions. It's not dogmatic whatsoever, but it's kind of a framework that, combined with the search for the truth and loving intention, we can make progress in coming up with we can make progress in coming up with an array of solutions that can be considered to be the bedrock of freedom. I really do believe that. Now, the second part is ego and truth, the elusive divide. Let's get back to Trump again. I just got to say it. I mean, I've never seen anybody in my life who plays foot and what's the expression? Plays around with the concept of truth, because he's I'm sorry, he's going to be president in 2 days, but as far as I'm concerned, he's just a pathological liar. Because he lies. I mean, it's just lies. He continues to lie. As a matter of fact, when Scott, what's the great actress that was made on the show there on the Golden Globe Awards, and she was in the news. She's a great actress. She's a fantastic, wonderful actress.
My mind's having a fart. You were looking for fast and loose was the expression you were looking for.
Fast and loose, yeah, right.
Yeah, she was in... I can see her face right now.
Right. I mean, what movie?
Wasn't she opposite Douglas in Michael Douglas in that movie?
I'm gonna get it right now.
Fatal Attraction. Wait. Didn't she play that?
No, that was never somebody else. I mean, I feel embarrassed that I'm not even remembering.
I'll look it up.
Let's see. Well, I'm looking up right now as we speak. The actress, but anyway, she made comment of the fact that when Trump during the primary campaign sort of made fun of one of the reporters because he had a disability, and why can't I find her? She's this is ridiculous. Let's see. Oh well. Let's see. Try this one here. Anyway, I'd like to. She's probably the greatest actress of our era, and dear, I can't. And it's tip my tongue.
It's Meryl Streep.
Meryl Streep. Thank you.
Thank you, Google. I didn't think it up. I read it.
Oh. I mean, I have a hole in my head when it comes to names. I really do. I have this names just don't stay in my head. Even a world famous individual like Meryl Streep. But anyway, I thought she was very on the Golden Globe Awards a few days ago or last week. She was very, she spoke beautifully and persuasively, and referring to what Trump did, making fun of that man, as she said, was a low light of the campaign. And it was very eloquent. And so then after that, I heard Trump, of course, what he says. Trump says, "Oh, she's overrated." That's a shit. I actually Twittered a thing. he said about 15. He called 15 celebrities overrated during the election campaign, because every time someone criticizes him, he has such thin skin that it's a knee-jerk response. He's overrated. She's overrated. And you know what? You don't believe me? Just look it up on Google and say Trump overrated, and you'll see all the times that he's called somebody overrated. That's like a knee-jerk response. And the thing is, I saw him on the interview, and he said, by the way, I did not make fun of that person, or I did make fun of someone with a disability. And all the world has seen it. And yet he continues to say he never did it. And most people in this country have seen it. I think Clinton had it in several of her campaign ads. I mean, it was played over and over and over and over again. Anyway, you know what? He's going to be president. I gotta get off of this. But the topics, when I start talking about things, he is such a poster board for the things that I think we should not do. Anyone should not do. Any civil person should not do. That's why it's pretty terrifying that he's going to be president. Anyway, getting back. Ego and truth, the elusive divide. The point I was trying to make there is, for Trump, I really believe that he cannot distinguish self-interest from objectivity. He really can't. I mean, you've seen it over and over again. He cannot distinguish what he feels is in his own interest and what is actually the case. And that's a pretty scary thing. But, it's not just Donald Trump. It's a lot of people. As a matter of fact, to a certain degree, everybody. Isn't that true? To a certain degree, everybody has a problem with distinguishing your own egoistic associations and how you egoistically see the world, and with objectivity. It's a big, big problem. It's part of the human condition. And so once again, though, let me go back. Just like in the sense of the question of freedom, it also goes back to, we can transform the ego, or not transform, I misspoke. We can transcend the ego. We can get beyond the ego we can to a significant degree, not totally, when we make an extra effort to look for other people's opinions. To, again, in my book, Ethical Empowerment, a concept I developed, I called, what is it now? Plural perspectivism, which is a very conscious, deliberate effort to poll, to research, to inquire for other points of view, other perspectives. And it doesn't mean that that's going to solve anything in the long run. You might still go back to your old view. But you know what? If we habituate ourselves to that kind of thinking, we will. We will become humbled. Because you know why? Because egoistic responses is also conditioned behavior. When you accustom yourself to say, hey, you know what? I was wrong. I think you're right. Let's go that way. When you accustom yourself to say, you know what? I'm very sorry. I made a mistake. I really apologize for that. When you begin to customarily in your own life make those humbling, statements, recognitions that you erred, or you learned something new and someone has a better idea than you do, and then you come around to accept that, that is conditioned behavior. That becomes easier to do. But if you grow up and say that I never want to say that I'm wrong, and say that there's no value in that, and I don't have to look at anyone else's opinion because I've made up my mind, that is a prescription for a lot of trouble, which we may be in. But I'm not talking about Trump. I'm talking in general terms. Okay, Scott, let's take a break.
In Ethical Empowerment, Virtue Beyond the Paradigms, Arthur D. Schwartz presents an ethical theory that is a framework for evaluating moral conundrums that go beyond legalistic rulemaking, dogmatism, and preconditioned thinking. The book is as much an ethical framework for unconventional ideas as it is for staying with convention. Ethical Empowerment is a manifesto of non-doctrinaire perspective. Ultimately, the hypnotic thinking of ideology and dogmatism can only be overcome by returning to the true source and essence of morality, which is nothing less than universal love. Discover how the philosophically liberating approach of the ethical empowerment can be applied to the range of ethical, social, and political controversy. Read about a plan to eliminate all political parties. Entertain the possibility of an overhaul of the patent system and its replacement with a system that rewards inventors while eliminating monopolistic control of patents and technological suppression. Many other transformative ideas are discussed in the book, including issues related to the monetary system, real estate, scientific paradigms, and a rational approach to conspiracy theory. While ethical empowerment will challenge your mind to consider new perspectives, the ethical challenge is always to keep the diversity, depth, and breadth of perspective within the boundaries of love. Ethical Empowerment is available at Amazon.com and most online booksellers in both print and e-book editions. Are you a person who enjoys intellectual social interaction and finds digging deeper into the nature of things, from big issues to everyday life, an important part of the pleasure of life? Social Philosophizers is a Boston area social club for those who desire intellectual socializing. It's a club for both singles and non-singles, and for anyone who finds intellectually mingling to be the best form of social mingling. The club offers a variety of interesting venues such as philosophical get-togethers in private venues, book discussions concerning literature and philosophy, topical discussions over brunch or dinner, guest speakers, theater, after-work mixers, even long philosophical ruminations along nature trails or city streets, and more. If you live in the greater Boston area or occasionally spend time in the area, you can choose a cost-effective membership level that's right for you. Basic membership is free. Find the link on Arthur's Philosophical Perspectives show page at ArtistFirst.com or just search SocialPhilosophizers.com. We hope you'll join Social Philosophizers today. That's SocialPhilosophizers.com. You're listening to Philosophic Perspectives on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. You can send questions and comments into DJ at ArtistFirst.com. And now back to your cool host, Mr. Arthur D. Schwartz.
Why, thank you, Scott. Well, so you know what? I spent so much time on Trump in the election. I just couldn't. I wasn't planning on talking about it today either. It just, Well, I was writing a little while I was writing this thing up today, and I said, oftentimes not being proved wrong trumps truth. That's exactly when I just realized, oh, yeah, well, because it's true. But anyway, I already talked about it, so I'm not going to go over that again. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting politically here over the next several months and beyond. Well, okay. Now let's go back to the ego and truth, the elusive divide. These concepts. If you want to get into philosophy, these three concepts: freedom, ego, truth. You basically got the three major themes that are the anchors of all philosophical thought, Western philosophy or Eastern philosophy as well. As a matter of fact, the subject of ego or self, and self and selflessness. I mean, all egoism, and of course altruism, selflessness. Self is basically ego. Most of the time, you generally speaking, you can talk about the self as the egoistic part of you. And back in March 18th, I think it was just the second show that I did here on ArtistFirst Radio. 3/18/15 was my second show, I believe, and it was called East Meets West, and it was about mostly about the subject of self and selflessness. It was a good show, and so if you're interested in that subject, I refer you to that. But the other thing that I've talked, one of my major favorite themes here, is of course alternative technology. And free energy and things like that, and cures, health cures, and so big pharma, and of course, ego. Is one of the triumvirate. I mean, it's ego or greed, power, and money. I mean, those are the three things that kind of trump the truth, trump progress, because when something like ego or something like money or something like power is being jeopardized, the human being, because we are just human, are easily swayed, you might say. Money, greed, and power. So greed is, in other words, another word in the sense for ego, in the sense that, it's, I guess that's not completely accurate, but for today's conversation, it's greed is egoistic. When you're not egoistic, when you're able to see the fact that your greed is going to take away something from somebody else who deserves it far more than you do, but because of your lousy ego, your big ego, you can't accept that. So you see, greed basically comes down to ego, because if you were more altruistic and your ego was smaller, you could see, well, yeah, I'm not going to do that, even though I might be able to get away with it. I'm going to let the people who deserve that money or those funds or whatever to have that. So that's how ego gets in the way. Now, in terms of alternative technology, how does it get away? Because you might be spending your life getting grants, building a reputation, writing books, being in academia or a researcher, and suddenly you come to this great realization, well, guess what? All my research basically was wrong. or maybe not totally correct, or maybe not as good as I thought it would be, or maybe with holes in it, or maybe has truth to it, but I feel in many cases, in the case of the pharmaceutical industry, they spend all this time, all this millions and millions of dollars developing drugs when they can develop and refine natural product supplements that have the laboratory of nature of millions of years working out there in the field and in the jungles and in the seas and in the lakes, creating chemicals, organic chemicals, that we use to cure disease for human beings, or for animals. And more and more of them are showing effectiveness. The thing is, why are they not more pursued? Because of the law that they can't make any money on it, because they're considered to be natural supplements. That's I forget back in, I think in 1980. I don't know, DSEA, I think. And the law that so you can't patent that, and there's no money in it for the pharmaceutical companies. It's just the system is so corrupt, but not only corrupt, dysfunctional. And so therefore, the products, either some of them are coming out, but for the most part, they're not being developed because there's no money in it. There's no money in it because of the system. Now, this is what I feel the way it should be done. I think that the government should take an active part. And not only an active part, they can actually even patent new pharmaceuticals, or they could spend money researching natural supplementation that's shown to be effective, and refine and get the right dosage levels and so forth and so on, which is not being done. And it's not being, you're not getting the same kind of, you're getting clinical trials and all of that. That doesn't happen. And so if the government would get the product and then open it up to the marketplace, so all companies can now, since they don't have to worry about money developing, because in this case the government did it, then all private industry can take advantage of what the government and private laboratories as well have come up with. That would completely revolutionize the system. By the way, I talk about this in my book, and the proposal I made in my book, and it would change everything. But you know what? You talk about ego, greed. It just permeates the system, and so it looks like it's never going to happen. So that's just the kind of, when I talk about ego and truth, it basically shows that it's difficult. We make it much more difficult on ourselves to actually allow ourselves to progress, to come up with new inventions, to find the truth. This is, here's another case of the ego. In the judicial system, I think, by the way, just for an aside, I think in my book I talk about that proposal about governments entering into the development of patents. It's part 2.15, and it's called "On Pseudoscience: Tales of the Pot and the Kettle." But I also talk about the legal system, and you know what? It's often it's been talked about. Talking about ego, why the prosecutors sometimes seem to feel more about getting a conviction than getting at the truth. Now, isn't that the most awful thing you can imagine? Maybe it's not totally malicious. Maybe it's subconscious, that you get so wrapped up in a case so that you think You've persuaded yourself that you're going after the truth. But these cases when, they got the DNA evidence and he's released from jail and all this, and then they still don't admit it. I met somebody recently who's done a film on this subject, and I hope to bring him onto the show. Scott, let's take another break, okay?
Ethical Empowerment, Virtue Beyond the Paradigms by Arthur D. Schwartz is a manifesto of non-doctrinaire perspective. A broad range of ideas and principles are discussed, but the ethical challenge is always to keep the diversity, depth, and breadth of philosophic perspective within the boundaries of love. One of the many transformative ideas discussed in Ethical Empowerment is a new type of patent system that would dramatically expedite the development of inventions by fairly rewarding inventors while at the same time eliminating monopolistic control of patents and threats of technological suppression. This proposal for a new patent system would unleash a new era of technology that has hitherto been thought impossible, and empower a new era of economic flourishing. Ethical Empowerment is available at Amazon.com and most online booksellers in both print and ebook editions. And listen to Arthur the first and third Wednesday of each month, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific Time on the ArtistFirst Radio Network.
This is Arthur D. Schwartz. Beliefs and disbeliefs can be very powerful. Much like philosophy, hypnotism is concerned with belief. Hypnotherapy, a practical application of hypnotism, may largely be described as the practice of removing false beliefs that form mental blocks to success, to happiness, and to well-being. In my hypnotherapy and philosophical counseling practice, I combine my work in philosophy with hypnotism in order to clear mental blockages that can occur on both conscious and subconscious levels. A mental block may be conscious or subconscious and can be expressed, for example, in the form of anxiety, low self-esteem or low motivation, bad habits, tobacco habits, weight gain, low performance, and much more. If you are interested in using hypnosis and the power of the mind to overcome mental blocks and barriers that have emerged in your life, please feel free to give me a call at 617-964-4800 or visit www.integralhypnosis.com. That's INTEGRAL hypnosis.com.
Ethical Empowerment, Virtue Beyond the Paradigms by Arthur D. Schwartz is a manifesto of non-doctrinaire perspective. A broad range of ideas and principles are discussed, but the ethical challenge is always to keep the diversity, depth, and breadth of philosophic perspective within the boundaries of love. One of the many topics discussed in Ethical Empowerment, in the section entitled Tales of the Pot and the Kettle, concerns the shouting matches between mainstream science and unconventional technologies that the mainstream loves to deride as pseudoscience. Some claimed inventions may well be hoaxes, but there is very good reason to believe that many others have been suppressed in order to retain monopoly control or for other unsavory reasons. Is free energy possible? Are cures for cancer being held back or impeded by big pharma and the medical establishment? To what extent may ego, money, and power stand in the way of revolutionary breakthroughs? Ethical Empowerment is available at Amazon.com and most online booksellers in both print and ebook editions. And listen to Arthur the first and third Wednesday of each month, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific Time on the ArtistFirst Radio Network.
Thanks for joining us on Philosophic Perspectives on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can pick them up at ArtistFirst.com. And now back to your host, Mr. Arthur D. Schwartz.
Why, thank you, Scott. Well, so I want to kind of go over. We're going to do a little something different here. I'm going to kind of refresh what I was just talking about. Then I'm going to, we're getting near the end anyway, and I just want to go over a few things. So the whole idea here of these intersecting topics is really about the intersection of freedom, ego, and truth. And from my view, it's a wonderful way to express why philosophy is important from my own vantage, because it's for my philosophical work is all about getting the clouds, getting the shards of meaning, the pieces of meaning, the bits of this and the bits of that and the fragments of that, and as Wittgenstein and Gilbert Ryle, these are ordinary language philosophers. Gilbert Ryle talked about the category mistake, where you get shards of meaning coming into a situation. They don't belong there, coming from something else. And all this confusion needs to be clarified. It's about clarifying meaning. And so when you look at ego, truth, and freedom, you have these concepts that can become very, very confused. Why? Because people we thinkers, discussers, conversationalists, we're not focusing on what goes beyond the words and what the real meaning is that the words are trying to get to. And what happens is we get too stuck on the words. And so you can see you're in a conversation. I'm sure you've had this situation where you're talking to somebody and you say the word, you say a certain word, and then you see the other person go, wah, and then you realize, no, I didn't mean it that way. You totally misconstrued what I was trying to say. But this happens all the time, where people get confused and they get into an argument because you're not communicating. And you can imagine when you magnify that hundreds and hundreds of times, and on a global level, how things can really, really blow up. So my book is Ethical Empowerment, Virtue Beyond the Paradigms. What I try to do is to create an ethical theory that allows a framework that's based upon loving intention. It breaks it down, what it means, and then it talks about how it applies to the self, how it applies to others. Not categorically, just in terms of a framework, how you go about things. And so then, of course, it talks about certain hard, objective qualities that enter into the equation, causality, and then dialectic is another concept that enters into it in terms of how we move forward. But basically, it's designed to help people get beyond the words and get to the true meaning that we are trying to get to. And by the way, meaning is built, it's created. When you make a statement, you're creating meaning. So what I'm saying is getting to the meaning that we're trying to get to, that we're trying to find. And if you're operating in such a way that you're taking account of many different factors and being open-minded and being open to other points of view and being able to say, you're right, I was wrong, then you can actually make progress in finding what it actually is you're trying to get to. And so that is really why I picked this confluence today, this confluence of three major concepts: freedom, ego, and the truth. And how it all started with, well, it didn't really start, but it did. I think the first idea percolated when I saw the movie Arrival, which was really, once again, I highly recommend it, starring Amy Adams. Okay, well, at this particular point in time, I do want to talk about something else, which I did do on another show recently. And I'm looking for people who want to guest on my show, and people who have interest in the subjects that we talk about here. And if you have a background if you're an author or you're an artist of some sort, a filmmaker, or not, but I'm not going to just bring on somebody doesn't have some kind of a track record of some sort to show me. However, I can be pretty lenient, and I can get you on to the radio roundtable, which are small discussions of 3 or 4 people, 5 at the most, probably 3 or 4, and in some cases it could be a solo, a single interview as well. I'm willing to do that, but if you're interested, just contact me at radio@arthurdschwartz.com, radio@arthurdschwartz.com. And I'd be happy to. Now, I have to say, on that particular email, there is a lot of spam protection, because for some reason I need it. But you can also contact me at info@integralhypnosis.com. That one has no problem that way. So send it to both. Radio@arthurdschwartz.com and or info@integralhypnosis.com. The thing is, on my spam, once I know who you are, I can whitelist you, so you get through. But there's a possibility right now that you might not get through. Okay, let me see if there's any. I know we're reaching near the end, but I just want to just double check that there's nothing I wanted to bring out today. No, I think what. I think I've pretty much said what I wanted to say, and so we'll bring today's show to an end. So this concludes tonight's broadcast. For links to my book, Ethical Empowerment, my philosophical counseling and hypnotherapy practice, and the Social Philosophizers Club, please visit arthurdschwartz.com. I would also add, visit creativityexpo.org. That's my other group as well. And that's a great place, by the way, to contact me on what's called the Presenters Registry. Take a look at it, creativityexpo.org, and also the Social Philosophizers Club. That's socialphilosophizers.com. And this is Arthur D. Schwartz, reminding you to live well and think deeply. So until next time, good night, everybody.